Hey everyone, and welcome to What Did I Miss? Where today I'll be breaking down the Easter egg heavy 6th episode of the final season of Star Trek Picard, titled Bounty. Seriously, there is a lot to get through, and I'm going to really try and pick out everything in not only the Daystrom Station and the Fleet Museum, but also all the returning characters. The title of the episode is not only a reference to the task that Vadic has been put to, which is to find Jack Crusher at all costs, but is also a reference to a Klingon bird of prey that was hijacked by the crew of the USS Enterprise and renamed the HMS Bounty by Dr. McCoy in the film The Voyage Home, a ship that we actually get to see later in this episode at the Fleet Museum and becomes essential to the Titan's escape. Captain Kirk and crew took the ship from the Klingons after they set the original USS Enterprise to self-destruct while the Klingons were still on it in the prior film The Search for Spock. This is why we do not see the original USS Enterprise at the Fleet Museum later in the episode, but thankfully, we do get to see its successor. Dr. McCoy took the name HMS Bounty from an infamous incident that occurred in 1789 that is most widely known as the Mutiny on the Bounty. Coincidentally, this episode of Picard features the crew of the Enterprise D along with members of the Titan committing acts of mutiny against Starfleet. The episode begins with Starfleet as well as Vadic on the hunt for the USS Titan A, but only finding the decoy beacons they leave behind. Vadic is visibly frustrated by being unable to find the Titan and has one of her crew executed on the bridge. We learned earlier this season that Vadic as well as her crew are Changelings, which are beings that can mimic the appearance of any other object or being, and were introduced on the series Deep Space Nine. Since there's a lot to go through in this episode of Picard, I'm not going to go over things I've covered before this season, but if you do want to know more about Vadic and the Changelings, I did put out a video on the species and their histories that you should definitely check out. After the intro, Beverly and Jean-Luc are discussing Jack's condition, and the doctor reveals that Jack has Irumodic syndrome, which is a Star Trek disease that affects the brain. In the first season of Picard, he learned from his doctor that his Irumodic syndrome had worsened, and that led eventually to Picard's death at the end of that season. Picard also had another Star Trek disease named Shalif syndrome as a child, which his clone Shinzon was afflicted with as well in the film Star Trek Nemesis, but Beverly does not mention if Jack had that too. After a reunion with Worf and Raffi, the crew discussed the threat of the Changelings and their past with the Federation. At one point, they discussed the morphogenic virus created by Section 31 that infected the Changelings as well as the Great Link during the Dominion War. The virus made it more difficult for Changelings to shape themselves into humanoids, and each time they attempted to do so, it progressed the disease further. Since the cure was only given to the Changelings that were in the Great Link, in the final episode of DS9 titled What You Leave Behind, any Changeling that did not have contact with the Great Link would still be infected, such as a Changeling named Laz that was unknowingly infected by Odo in the Deep Space Nine episode named Chimera. If Laz was able to join with any other Changelings after visiting Deep Space Nine, this could have started this rival faction that is set against the Federation now. The crew decided to break into Daystrom Station, which is an off-site facility of the Daystrom Institute, a Starfleet institution known for research and development that has been mentioned many times before. Both are named after Richard Daystrom, a scientist from 23rd century Earth whose genius was thought to be on par with Albert Einstein in the field of artificial intelligence. He created an advanced computer system sophisticated enough to operate a starship without the need of a human crew, but went crazy before he could perfect it, event shown in the original series episode titled The Ultimate Computer. Incidentally, the computer Dr. Daystrom built was named the M5 and was based on a human neural network which included aspects of his own personality. We learn in this episode that Daystrom Station is also protected by an advanced AI whose inventor included aspects of his own and other AI personalities. This being calls itself Daystrom Android M510, which could mean this is the 10th variation of that same program that Dr. Daystrom created, tying Dr. Soon's creations together with Starfleet's first AI scientist, Richard Daystrom. Although he is not revealed until the third act, you can hear Brent Spiner's voice say thank you when Worf enters the device into the Daystrom security system.
Thank you.
As they begin to walk around, Worf states that this site houses many items held by Section 31. I've gone over what Section 31 is in pretty much every video I created this season, so I won't now, but I think that since Worf knows that Section 31 keeps stuff at this facility, it may be confirmation that he and Ro were operatives of Section 31 and not working with Starfleet directly. This means that Section 31 are actually the good guys this season, which would be a first. I feel like Riker is every Star Trek fan here because while he's walking around the station, he tries to get a good look at everything he passes. The first thing he passes is a Thalaron generator, which was a deadly device used by Shinzon and his allies in the film Star Trek Nemesis. Riker also passes a Genesis device, which was a scientific discovery that could create and destroy life on a planet in almost an instant. The device was first seen in the film Wrath of Khan, and the result of its detonation in that film was a big part of its sequel, The Search for Spock. It is interesting to note that the panel here states that this is a Genesis 2 device, which possibly means that Starfleet or someone else has created a newer version of this technology. Raffi also passes the final resting place of Captain James T. Kirk. The existence of this tomb would mean that James Kirk's burial site is not on Veridian 3, where Picard created a gravesite for him in the film Star Trek Generations. When Worf rounds the corner, behind him I believe you can see a picture of a device known as a vinculum, which is a processing device at the heart of every Borg vessel that interconnects the minds of all its drones and was featured in the Voyager episode Infinite Regress. In that episode, Seven begins to exhibit the personalities of other people, in her case people she helped assimilate. Throughout the episode, she is cycling through different personalities, which is very similar to what occurs with the Daystrom android cycling through its different personalities in this episode of Picard. Worf then comes upon the greatest enemy of the Klingon Empire, the Tribble. This furry creature was first introduced in the classic original series episode, The Trouble with Tribbles, where we learn that Tribbles have a certain aversion to Klingons and vice versa. This is better explained in another classic Star Trek episode, Deep Space Nine's Troubles and Tribulations, in which Worf is forced to explain the history between the two warring species to a skeptical Odo.
A mortal enemy of the Empire.
They were an ecological menace. Hundreds of warriors were sent to track them down throughout the galaxy. An armada obliterated the Tribble homeworld.
Another glorious chapter of Klingon history. Tell me, do they still sing songs of the great Tribble hunt?
You can also see from the screen readout that this is a genetically modified Tribble, so yeah, I think they should let Worf kill it. Riker is also quick to mock the struggle between the Klingons and the Tribble to Worf, who seems to not appreciate the banter. We have seen Riker pick on Worf on multiple occasions, like in the film Star Trek First Contact.
The Defiant. Adrift, but salvageable.
Tough little ship.
Little.
You do remember how to fire phasers.
The group alert the security system in the facility and a crow flies by them. Afterwards, Riker and Raffi remark,
"There's something familiar about the crow."
Yeah, right. Like from my nightmares.
They are referencing the events of the Next Generation episode titled Phantasms, in which Data experiences nightmares, some of which included a crow. After hearing two musical notes, which Riker is able to recognize, the group are face to face with the hologram of Professor Moriarty. The archenemy of Sherlock Holmes was recreated by Geordi along with Dr. Pulaski on the holodeck in the Next Generation episode Elementary My Dear Data. The first line we hear him say is taken directly from a conversation that he has with Picard and Data in that same episode.
I think, therefore I am.
Is the definition of life cogito ergo sum? I think, therefore I am.
Meanwhile, the Titan arrives at the Fleet Museum at Athen Prime, where many of Starfleet's most storied vessels are kept after they are decommissioned. Captain Shaw tells Ensign LaForge to
find a pocket among the relics.
I believe that this is a reference to the Next Generation episode Relics, where Scotty, a member of the original series crew, is found alive in a transporter by the crew of the Enterprise D. One of the ships at the Fleet Museum is the Constitution-class USS New Jersey, and Picard mentions to Scotty in that episode how he had seen a Constitution-class vessel at the Fleet Museum, possibly referencing the ship.
Constitution class.
Aye. You're familiar with them?
There's one in the Fleet Museum.
Also, the registry on the USS New Jersey is 1975, and Picard's Season 3 showrunner Terry Matalas was born in New Jersey in the year 1975. Then we get the return of Geordi LaForge, played by LeVar Burton. We have seen his on-screen daughter Sydney LaForge all season on the Titan, but his other daughter Alondra makes her debut in this episode and is played by his real-life daughter, Mika Burton. The finale of The Next Generation, All Good Things, featured an alternate future for these characters, and in that future, it was mentioned that LaForge had two daughters named Sydney and Alondra. Two ships are searching for the intruders at Daystrom Station, and one is named the USS Sternbach. This ship is named after longtime Star Trek production designer Rick Sternbach, who has not been involved with the franchise since the film Star Trek Nemesis. On the station, Worf, Raffi, and Riker are still trying to figure out the purpose of Professor Moriarty being there, while the station continues to create different musical notes. Suddenly, Riker is able to recognize the tune and remembers his first encounter with then Lieutenant Commander Data on the holodeck of the Enterprise D, in the pilot episode of The Next Generation titled Encounter at Farpoint. Moriarty's final word in the scene is the first word that Data says to Riker during their first meeting.
Marvelous.
The group are then brought into a room that contains an android golem body made to resemble the final crew member we have yet to see this season, Data, along with the remains of the android B4. Data, while of course being one of the main characters on The Next Generation and playing a small role in the first season of Picard, is one of 3 quote-unquote Soon-type android brothers that we have seen before, all of which were created by a scientist named Noonien Soon. B4, his first attempt, was the simplest of these Soon-type androids and was found in pieces in the film Star Trek Nemesis. Lore was the result of the next attempt at a fully functional positronic brain, and while it was successful, his personality made him malicious and unstable, which led eventually to him being deactivated in the Next Generation episode titled Descent. Alton Soon, while not an android, would technically be considered their brother too, since he is the biological son of their creator, Noonien Soon. Also, at one point Data tried to create a daughter who he named Lal. While Data was able to bring her to life, she did not survive past a few days, events shown in the Next Generation episode titled The Offspring. In that episode, Data said he was able to store her memories and experiences, and we see that this android at Daystrom Station is able to incorporate all these beings' memories and personalities into itself. On the ship, Seven and Jack look at some of the various other starships docked at the Fleet Museum. The first one they come upon is the USS Defiant, the main vessel used by the crew on the series Deep Space Nine that was introduced during the show's 3rd season premiere. The original USS Defiant was a prototype vessel for the Defiant class and was destroyed in one of the largest battles of the Dominion War. However, another Defiant-class ship, the Sao Paulo, was renamed the Defiant due to its accomplishments in the war. The next ship they stop on is the Constitution-class USS New Jersey that I mentioned earlier. The next is the USS Enterprise A, which Jack correctly refers to as Kirk's Enterprise. While it could be said that Captain James T. Kirk had many more adventures on the original ship, he was not the first captain of it, something fans now get to see on the series Strange New Worlds, which features a younger version of the Enterprise under the command of Captain Pike. Besides Captains Kirk and Pike, now Admiral Robert April was the actual first captain of the USS Enterprise. The next one they stop on is close to Seven's heart, and that is the USS Voyager. She mentions that even though the ship is not as well known as the Enterprise, that it went further out than any other ship had gone before, which is true, since even though the USS Defiant traveled to the Gamma Quadrant on the series DS9, the Delta Quadrant, where Voyager took place, is further away from Federation space. While they are talking, Jack tells Seven that he thinks everyone is looking for connections, which is something that his dad told him just 2 episodes ago.
We all long for connection.
I think we all need connection.
Then they come upon the HMS Bounty, which I described earlier. The two also briefly recap the events of the finale of the film Star Trek The Voyage Home. Geordi refuses to help Picard and company, but the kids have other ideas. Picard and LaForge's children are able to steal the cloaking device from the Klingon bird of prey and install it on the USS Titan. The USS Defiant also had a cloaking device, but it is stated that they are using the one on the Bounty. Federation ships usually do not use cloaking devices thanks to a long-standing treaty with the Romulan Empire, who, like the Klingons, have developed and used the technology. Sydney and Jack are able to correctly install the device, and Geordi finally agrees to help. Before he does so, he tells Jack to stay away from his daughter, and in case you are wondering, this was the subtext of that exchange.
I don't want to see you sniffing around her anymore this afternoon. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Boy, have you lost your mind, because I'll help you find it.
The remaining crew activate Daystrom android M510, and multiple personalities emerge. Although still not fully functional, he is able to reveal that the body of Jean-Luc Picard is what was stolen by the Changelings. The episode ends with a now captured Riker coming face to face with his wife, Deanna Troi, meaning that each member of the original TNG cast set to appear this season does so in this episode. However, since Changelings can mimic any human being, it is possible that this is not the former counselor on the Enterprise D&E. Well, that was everything I saw, but let me know in the comments if I missed anything. Thank you very much for watching this episode. Please hit that like button if you have enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time on What Did I Miss?